Today, we become legends.
Reworks are always a controversial topic, with one side of the aisle saying that a rework would completely ruin their main and make them quit, and the other side saying a rework is necessary because the god in question is problematic in some way, or just plain not fun for most people. With that said, this video is just my personal take on a few gods that could use some form of rework going into Smite 2, as I think this is the best and potentially only good time to majorly change the roster in big ways. With it being a new game, people will be more tolerant to or even expecting of major changes like this, and this kind of opportunity won't come around again, unless you're a believer in Smite 3 for 2035. This will become clearer as I go through my picks, but there are of course different kinds of reworks you can make to a god. I separate these into three main categories. Number 1, a full rework, where the entire god kit is changed completely and the new one is unrecognizable from the old one, with at most one ability remaining and the god plays completely differently from its old design. This type of rework is extremely rare and basically unheard of in modern Smite 1, but some examples from earlier in its life would be Kali, Vulcan, and Nox. Number 2, a major rework, where large parts of a kit are changed but some old stuff that works well in the old kit is kept. This might be replacing a few abilities entirely and minorly changing others, for example Nuwa, Arachne, and Hell from the early days of Smite 1. And finally, number 3, the minor rework, where the core kit essentially remains the same with a very similar playstyle, with at maximum one ability completely replaced, but usually minor tweaks are made to other abilities to improve their functionality, feel, or fairness within the game. This is by far the most common type of rework, especially in modern Smite 1, and there are plenty of examples of these like Loki, Erlangchen, Thor, Odin, and others. Alright, with that out of the way though, let's get into exactly which people I'll piss off today by suggesting their god should be reworked going into Smite 2, and which of these three rework types I suggest for them. So first up we have Freya, who, spoiler alert, I think is the only god that needs a complete kit rework going into Smite 2. All others on the list will be either major or minor reworks, but we've seen for years on end through 3 different reworks and styles of play that this design just doesn't work in Smite. Could that change in Smite 2 because of the new systems like strength and intelligence? Maybe, but efforts throughout Smite 1's entire lifecycle have completely failed to make Freya balanceable and fun to play against. She either completely dominates everything in sight or languishes in irrelevance based on tiny balance changes to her or her very specific and narrow item pool. I think she just needs a complete change to her kit going into Smite 2. If you're interested, I do have a dedicated video going over my personal design for Freya as a warrior that still utilizes that sometimes melee, sometimes ranged identity, so you can check that out after this one if you're interested. Alright, moving on, let's talk about a quick one. Surtur's base kit is absolutely brilliant in my opinion and flows really well. The abilities have synergy with each other and the infinite stacking damage aspect on his one is really cool. Surtur's ultimate on the other hand, absolute garbage that does not fit with his design whatsoever. You're playing a pressure game, being in people's faces, going with the flow of the battle, and then you press 4 and just kind of sit there for like 5 seconds until you can come back down and use the actually fun part of his kit. Give Surtur some kind of fast-acting, pressure-based ultimate in Smite 2, and it would make his whole kit flow together so much better. You could make minor changes to his base kit as well if you wanted to be spicy, but I think his ultimate is the main reason this character is just decent, whereas he could be one of the best warrior designs there is. Next up is Hades, who I think would also do fine with a minor rework. My personal idea for him is to add a spirit minion mechanic to him, similar to what Cerberus has. His 1 and 2 would spawn a certain number of spirit minions which could attack nearby enemies if you wanted to, and apply blight, or just follow enemies and maybe slow them a little bit. The idea here though is that you can detonate these spirit minions with Devour Souls to make it actually threatening in team fights. At that point you can nerf the damage and or healing of it per minion so his laning phase isn't so oppressive without making him completely useless for team fights. His ult could potentially spawn some of these as well if you wanted even more synergy, or you could completely replace his ult into something faster that could also exploit nearby spirit minions for bonuses, but that's venturing into major rework territory and I honestly don't think he really needs that, though I am a Hades hater so I'm definitely not opposed to it going into Smite 2. Next up is Nox, who is one of those more hated gods Smite has to offer, and for good reason. I gotta say, for this one I'm not sure if I would go for a major or a minor rework, but my general idea with Nox is to lean into her more supportive aspects and take some ideas from her original anti-mage design. Her old design had its problems for sure, and I'm not suggesting we fully revert her back to that, but it had some super interesting ideas with the pseudo silence on on her ultimate and short-lasting mitigation shield on her 1, among others. You could potentially move her 2 to be her ultimate instead, but much larger and more damaging, maybe even more long-lasting, and it links enemies to her for a short duration afterwards and damages them again if they cast an ability in that time, to bring back that major pseudo-silence aspect that her old kit had. Moving the combo to her ultimate would also allow it to be made much more powerful, but also less frustrating, as it's not burning your beads or killing you every 12 seconds like it does now. It will be on a much longer cooldown. Though it could even go below 90 seconds if you wanted to keep some of her old beads burning capabilities intact. I don't know, I don't have a fully formed idea of what I would want a Nox rework to look like, but those are some of my general ideas to reduce her frustration factor and make her a more interesting design in Smite 2. Next up is a recent one we've all had trouble with, and that's the big baby himself, the Mana. It's no secret that this guy has always been a bit of a problem character within Smite 1, and that's only become more evident in the last couple of years. This problem exists pretty much entirely within his ultimate, so I think there are 2 ways you could approach a rework for him in Smite 2. The first way is to just flat out replace the ultimate completely into something radically different. Perhaps keep in the giant form theme and make it so he can use his regular abilities during his ultimate, but they have bonus effects or applications of some kind. The other option is to rework or enhance for Mana's base kit, which sort of sucks and is boring and outdated at this point. Giving his base kit some actual spice would allow some of the ridiculous stat bloat to be taken away from his ultimate without completely obliterating his viability. Either way, I think something needs to be done regarding Colossal Fury moving into Smite 2. From an OP and frustrating character to a terrible and frustrating one, Kumba is a god that basically hasn't existed in Smite for several years, and despite buffs to try and bring him into viability, he remains one of the lowest pick rate and lowest win rate gods across all levels of play. People don't enjoy playing him or playing against him, and I think that's a mark of a bad design. I truly don't have anything specific in mind for Kumba, and it could be a matter of reworking his 1 and tweaking other parts of his kit, but I definitely would not be opposed to a full-on rework for him either going into Smite 2. Next up, Scotty. This is a pick that will probably piss a lot of people off, as I know plenty of players love her design, but I truly think something more could be done with the idea of a pet-based character than is being done with Scotty right now. I would much prefer to see a kit where Calder is weaved into every single ability in a major way, rather than just an ancillary stat buff like on Scotty's current one, for example. Make Scotty's actual kit more interesting, but then make Calder do additional effects or hitboxes on those abilities. You could also introduce a leveling system where Calder slowly levels up from level 0 to level 3 throughout the match as you do stuff with your abilities. Sort of similar to Mulan. So when you start off the game, Calder is basically an attack bot like he is now, but as he gains experience, he starts taking part in your abilities more and more to the point where he's doing just as much as Scotty herself when he hits level 3. I don't know, this is another one that I don't really have a super specific idea in mind for, but I do think so much more could be done with the idea of Calder rather than just press 2 and watch the enemies die, maybe press 4 if doggo is low. It's boring, uninteractive, and could be done so much better. Next up is one that has already received a rework, but it was one of the most poorly received ones of all time, that of course being Persephone. Basically, what I want to see here is her 2 and 1 almost entirely reverted, while her passive needs yet another rework. During her first round of changes, Persephone basically went from a frustrating but interesting and skillful design to a frustrating and not interesting brain-dead design. She's still pretty much as annoying to play against as she was before, minus the passive shenanigans, and all this rework really did was dumb her down and ruin the specialness of her design for those that did play her. The old passive was definitely a problem, and the new passive is just nothing, so revert her 1 and 2, give her a new and actually interesting and useful passive, and for me personally, I would also change her ultimate, because that's the other major frustration point in her design in my opinion, but I know a lot of Persephone mains do love that aspect of her kit, so it's up in the air on whether an ultimate rework would be a good call or not for Smite 2 Persephone. My second to last rework for this video would be for the Spoda Queen herself, Arachne. This is another one that has already been reworked once, but I don't think it was super successful in making her a fun character for everyone. Sure, she's fun for the person playing her, stomping, going 12 and 2, but one of the worst characters in the game to play against. She's pretty much the definition of feast or famine. She either gets an early lead and holds left click W at the whole team, snowballing to an easy win, or she gets put behind early and can't even survive long enough to get her 2 auto attacks off for the stun before having to use her ultimate defensively and go back to farming. 2 steroids in 1 kit is always a bit weird as well. I really have no ideas on what exactly to do with Arachne, and she potentially could be a candidate for a full-on rework going into Smite 2. The only thing I do like about this design are the webs. I think they should probably stay in some kind of redesign, but the way her current kit plays is just super unhealthy for the game and needs a change going forward in my opinion. And finally for this video we have Callie, who is another auto attack assassin that has already been reworked once and causes a similar problem to Arachne but reversed. Where the spider needs to get a massive lead early on and snowball that to a win by holding left click W, Callie just needs to survive the early game, get 3 or 4 items and then win the game by holding left click W. Original Callie was ability based, and while I don't think her ult kit should come back directly, I do think that her target heal and immunity to death mechanics would work a lot better on an ability based design. The way it is at the moment, she just gets 5 seconds of complete freedom to hold left click W and only suffers to a disarm or hard CC. When you have to work around ability cooldowns, this would add a lot more thinking and counterplay to her design, as you have to be more careful and calculating when diving in for a kill, since you need to know your abilities will be up and will do enough damage to secure that kill. If you dive in on a full health target, burn all of your cooldowns and leave them on 20% health, you're in a pickle, whereas current Callie just has infinite damage on no cooldown thanks to her being an auto attacker, so she has no such problems. Being ability based would solve a lot of Callie's pain points in my opinion, and while I don't have a specific design in mind, I do think returning her to being ability based for Smite 2 would be a good call. But that's all I've got for 10 gods I would want to see reworked in some form going into Smite 2. Definitely let everyone know down in the comments if you have any reworks you're personally hoping for, and even give some explanation on why you think they're a problem and what a rework could look like for them if you've got the time. Catch you guys in another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.